Young Father's heavy album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Young Father's Scottish sort of art rock, but also art pop and experimental hip hop group. I'm sorry, they've always been a little hard to classify. And since their early recordings, they have done that. Their early tapes, tape 1 and tape 2, were a blend of very eclectic alternative hip hop, soul, lo-fi music, noise pop, art pop, and a whole lot more as well. I mean, both these tapes were like 22 minutes long, maybe 25, but both of them did the sound that they were working with, as eclectic as it was, a lot of justice and really hyped me up. These were colorful, soulful projects that were short but full of heart. Now, I do have to be pretty blunt about Dead, their full-length album. I've never been that crazy for it. I was actually shocked by how little I was into it, especially after how much I loved their first 2 tapes. I mean, the material was decent, some of the singles were great, and lyrically they were still a force to be reckoned with. That wasn't the problem. But after hearing some of their early work, I was expecting to hear something a lot bigger and bolder. If anything, I was a lot more impressed with their follow-up, White Men Are Black Men Too. This was sort of what I was expecting from their debut album. The clashing styles, the different genres, the very forward-thinking thoughts, the exhilarating production, the poignant lyrics. It's all here, and it's pretty darn good. And while not their biggest political statement or experimental recording, I still think that Cocoa Sugar has a lot going for it. It's just great singles. I don't think it got enough respect. But still, I sit here thinking that, listening to those early tapes, which I re-listened to a few weeks ago, and they still are so fun and big and robust for such short projects. I've still been sitting here just waiting for Young Fathers to come out with an album that I look at as a happening. And leading up to this album, I thought we were about to get that, because single after single really did catch my ear. I thought they were really great. I thought they were sounding really sharp and witty and just unified. And I was expecting a happening with this new album. And that's what we get. This album starts off with Rice, and right off the bat, you can count me in on this. There's elements of everything from colorful art pop, old school folk rock, the experimental hip hop that they've always touched down upon. But instantly, I'm just in awe of the clashing styles and just how colorful and full of personality it is. But it's also really well written, very current. But it's also oddly joyous. It's an anthem. It wakes me up. It makes me want to listen to the rest of this album. It gets me grooved. It gets me pumped, and it's a fantastic intro. On the other hand, I Saw has just this incredible groove to it. This is a hell of a single. It also has some incredibly intense performances, more than you can ask for. It is very in your face, but it really doesn't hold back at all. The way that this track builds, swells, just encapsulates everything around it. It is pretty mesmerizing. It is gigantic, while most importantly, remaining just as charged up and focused as the intro to this album. And it just keeps growing. By the end of this track, it is a massive, clashing, loud, noisy anthem of a track, and probably one of the best singles I've heard in a while. This is a happening. Then we have drum, and I haven't really touched down upon this yet, but the urgency of this album reminds me of their early work. They seem to have just, in the early days of Young Fathers, had such a, message and just such an urgency to their music that they just had to let it out. I get that here. I haven't heard Young Fathers just so desperate to get this message out in such a timely manner in so long, and that is so good. This track is wild-eyed, explosive, colorful, euphoric. It is, quite frankly, an experience. On the other hand, Tell Somebody is much more pensive and stripped down. The ambient synths and the very distant vocals that we get here are very different than a lot of the rest of the album. And to be honest with you, when I first heard it as a single, without hearing the album around it, it really threw me off and I didn't know what to think of it. But hearing this album in the greater scheme of things, honestly, this single is great. It's absolutely chilling. It's sort of haunting at times, but it's also really artsy and kaleidoscopic. Wow. Geronimo is really great too. It's one of the more subdued meditative tracks here. But it's also just as punchy. I mean, they lock in on this groove here and they don't let up. And on top of that, I have not heard a single track here yet that isn't just full of 100% passion and purpose. And, once again, I'll say it, hearing this as a single without the rest of the album, it didn't hit me as hard, but now it feels like an experience. This, to me, is the Young Fathers album that we deserve. Wow, just wow. I mean, I knew I was going to like this album, but I love this album. Shoot me down. By the time we get to this, what even is this? This brings back the eclectic, wild sounds of their early days. It's got left field rhythms. It's got, oddball samples dripping all over the place. Some chants thrown in for good measure as well. I mean, it's somber, and it definitely has, a very strong message behind it, but it's also full of hope, and it's oddly joyous at times. There's a lot going on in this album, but Young Fathers do a great job of wrapping it up, putting a little bow on it, making it sound great. It's the clash of styles and the statement that I needed in music right now. With Ululation, the blend of styles, genres, influences continues to shine. And while the energy of this track may not match the energy of the rest of this album, it continues to be a mesmerizing, hypnotizing experience that is awe-inspiring. I'm actually pretty speechless. And sink or swim, at first, I didn't like this track. I mean, it's hectic, and if you blink for a second, you might miss 10 little details on this track, but it has grown quite a bit. And yes, it's messy. There are elements of this track that are quite literally just bouncing off one another at a moment's notice. But it's exciting, it's exhilarating, it's got a whole mess of personality. And the shouted vocals we get at the end, nice touch. And with Holy Moly, clearly this album has no means of, slowing down for even a second. This is one of the bulkier and heavier tracks here. That, alongside of one of the most intense, headiest vocal performances, it's not going to be for everyone. But it doesn't let up. It keeps steamrolling along, blasting alongside you. And honestly, it's pretty thrilling. Now, if I did have one issue with this album, it's the closer, Be Your Lady. I just did not enjoy this track nearly as much as the rest of the album. This, to me, sounds like a track that would have shown up on either, White Men or Black Men 2 or Cocoa Sugar, and it just wouldn't have fazed me that much. It's not really inspired on an album that has been nothing but inspired. And when things get noisy halfway through, yeah, things do get a lot better. But I feel like this is one of the most unfocused tracks here, too. And, I don't know. That just kind of brings me down a peg and just upsets me. But guys, come on. Ladies, come on. Everybody, come on. This is easily the most must-listen album of the year so far. This takes everything that Young Fathers were doing great in the early days, but putting it in full-length album form, really turning everything up a notch with some great production, some stellar performances that are pretty awe-inspiring for the most part. I mean, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about this album. It is exciting. It is poignant. It is urgent. It is begging for you to listen to it, and I, for one, can't wait to listen to it again. It's pretty freaking perfect. I mean, I wish they ended the album a little bit stronger, but still, come on. I'm feeling a decent 9 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.